Hey everybody, this is your pal Jacob from Perfect Circuit, and today I'm going to offer some suggestions on building your first pedal board, whether it be for guitar, bass, synths, drum machines, or any other instrument you could imagine. If you're curious for a more detailed look at the things we're talking about in this video, be sure to go down to the description below this video and find a link to an article that I wrote on our Signal blog, where I go over all of the pedals in more detail, show off some other ideas, and talk a little bit more about ways you could possibly expand this board or other ideas to play around with what we're talking about today. So when you're building a pedal board, there's a lot to talk about, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to stick with talking about just the actual pedals themselves, just because there's so much variance in how you can actually choose out a pedal board to put your pedals on, as well as actually powering the pedals. For example, I once built a pedal board out of a wooden craft sign kit that I got from like Target or something. And it worked when I was in a pinch and needed something for a band I was playing with, but I would generally recommend something like this pedal train that we have here. But if you're in a pinch, you can use something like that. But anyways, let's actually talk about the pedals that I've got here today. For the purposes of keeping this video concise, I've placed some arbitrary constraints on the pedals that I picked. Notably, I'm thinking of this as maybe a starter pedal board for someone that needs to cover a lot of musical ground regardless of the instrument that they play. And because they might just be starting out, I decided to keep things roughly around the $500 budget point. So you could start out by grabbing one or two of these and work your way up, or start with the whole collection and then expand from there. Over the course of this video, I'll use a couple of different guitars to show off some sounds, and I'll also be playing the lovely Micro Freak from Arturia to show off how it sounds with synthesizers as well. Off camera, we're using the Walrus ACS1. This is a great alternative to having a real amp if you don't have the space or ability to mic up a real amp. This is an awesome alternative to that. It sounds great. It works really well for what we're doing today. So now let's actually talk about the pedals that we're using today. First up, we have the MXR Dynacomp. This is just a dead simple 2-knob compressor that just glues up your guitar and makes it sound really funky and really great. But it's also great for synths and drums as well. Following that, we have the Plumes from Earthquaker Devices. This pedal came out a couple years ago and it's kind of been a smash hit for players of all styles. Following that, we have the DS1 from Boss. Now this particular pedal, there's some pretty strong opinions on it out there, but the fact remains that it costs like 50 bucks, and for that money, you get something really awesome, really dirty and heavy, and it's very workable with a bunch of other amps and pedals, so it's such an incredible value. After that, we have the Canyon from Electro Harmonics. This is the only pedal here that's over 100 bucks, and because things like the Dynacomp and especially the DS1 sit below the $100 price point, I thought it would be cool to stretch a little bit above $100 to get something as versatile and unique as this pedal. And then finally, we have the 3 Series Reverb from JHS. You'd be very hard pressed to find a good reverb pedal for about 100 bucks, and this one and the new Hall Reverb are both excellent options for that. I just went with this one because it's a bit more general purpose, but this and the Hall Reverb are both great pedals. So now let's hear how they all sound together. Now, if this is your first rodeo with building a pedal board, you might be wondering what the best order to plug them in would be. A little while back, I wrote a Signal article that covers different effect orders, the traditional way you might do things, and then offered some ideas of how you might deviate from that. And because we're putting a little pedal board together here today, I thought it might be cool to explore similar concepts in real time. Most notably, especially if you're approaching this from the perspective of a guitar player, a common topic you'll hear people talk about is the idea of stacking overdrive and distortion pedals together. What I mean by this is, we have the Plumes and the DS1 here. We can have both of them on individually, or we can have them on together at the same time for a super heavy, crunchy tone. But plugging the Plumes into the DS1 is going to sound a lot different than the DS1 plugged into the Plumes. So first, we're going to show off some examples of how the Plumes sounds with the DS1 after it, and then we're going to show off the DS1 going into the Plumes, and this is what they sound like. So yeah, it's pretty cool and pretty fun to play with overdrives and distortion pedals in this way, and hopefully you got an idea of how much of an impact the order in which you're plugging them in has on the resulting sound. Another common area of experimentation is going to be with your delay pedals and your reverb pedals. Traditionally, if you think about the way that sounds are created in the natural world, you'll hear echoes that start to diffuse over time. So you have naturally on your pedal board, to recreate that, you have delay first, followed by reverb. But you can get a lot of interesting textures by defying the laws of physics and going reverb into delay. So check out this kind of alt-rock funky riff that I've got playing here with a slapback delay going into the reverb, and then the reverb going into the slapback delay. Finally, for a bonus example here today, I'm going to try throwing the compressor at the very end of the signal chain, after our delay and reverb. I'll play the same riff again, and you'll hear how the compressor really glues things together, sort of how you might use a compressor on your master track in a mixing session. And so with all of that in mind, it should be pretty clear that one of the most fun parts of building a pedal board is experimenting with the order that you're plugging things in. But, you know, this is just an example that I'm doing here with these few pedals based on my experiences and my personal taste. And the best thing to get cool results is, of course, to go home and try it yourself. For the last thing we'll talk about today, we're gonna address the reality of maybe this isn't enough for your specific musical needs. Maybe eventually, once you've gotten a feel for things, you need to expand your pedal board down the road. And I'm going to share a few ideas of how you might take this collection of pedals or a similar assortment of things and build upon it from there for your particular musical needs. So one of the easiest and most obvious things you could add to this would be a good old tuner pedal. This is the Korg Pitch Black, but there's a ton of great ones out there. They also function as handy mute switches most of the time, so if you're changing guitars, changing instruments, whatever, it has a nice secondary function as well. Another idea is if these two particular drive pedals, or whatever you might have, aren't giving you enough tonal variety, you can invest in something like this MXR 6-band EQ. This one is particularly nice because it has the sort of radio style graphic EQ going on, so you can really carve out specific frequencies and get a lot of tonal variety out of this. So in this next musical example, I'll show you how the two plumes and DS1 sound together, and then I'll kick on the EQ and see how it really brings things to life. And if you're looking for other ways to get swirly, washy textures going on, you could look at the abundance of modulation pedals that are out there. There's choruses, which I'm particularly fond of, as well as phasers and ring modulators, tremolos, and all kinds of other stuff. But today I'm going to be using the Neo Mistress from Electro-Harmonix. This is a cool flanger pedal for those nice sort of jet swooshing, whooshy sounds. Lastly, especially if you're using this pedal board in a studio environment or with a synthesizer, you might want to look into ways to kind of spice up how you're routing things around. One option would be to get a mixer, which would allow you to split your signal into parallel signal paths and then sum them all together. So you could have your distortions on one path, your delay and reverb on another one, and maybe your compressor for sort of parallel compression type sounds. There's a bunch of great pedals out there for that, like the Old Blood Noise Endeavor's Signal Blender and the Electro-Harmonix Tri-Parallel Mixer. But then you could also just get something like the Bastille Dude, which is just this nice little, even battery-powered little guy that can just pop onto the corner of your board there and mix your signals together nicely. Another option, if you find yourself particularly enamored with experimenting with effects orders, would be to get something like the Board Brain Patchulator. So this essentially puts all of your pedals into different loops, and then you can patch the order differently with these little green cables up top. And this is particularly cool because you could craft a particular signal path for a song you're working on, unpatch it at the end of the day, and as you're saying goodnight to your gear, you can be like, "Patch you later, alligator. Patch you while, crocodile." Well, that's pretty much all I had today, so I hope everything we talked about here instills you with confidence to go out and venture forth and perhaps build a pedal board on your own. But if you find yourself just so disheartened by the end of this video and you crave even more content, be sure to go down to the description and wander your way over to our Signal blog, where we talk about this in further detail, as well as a number of other topics ranging from the history of synthesis to other neat new products that are coming out and blowing our minds collectively. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and drop a comment down below telling us about the first time you built a pedal board. Thanks for watching.